Welcome everyone once again. Good evening or good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are joining us from. Welcome to the panel discussion, the virtual panel discussion we're having today, the Women's Contribution to the Culture of Peace, organized by the Journalists and Writers Foundation. I am Jammu, the UN representative of JWF. So glad to have everyone virtually meeting for this important discussion. Actually, our panel, an official parallel event for the CSW, was planned to take place in one of the official venues designated by the NGO CSW. However, due to the increasing threat of coronavirus, the Commission has amended and canceled all the sessions and parallel events. We are still happy that our city is making progressive attempts in order to disable any further spread of this virus. And we would love to share our beautiful energy all together in a room, but we have a good amount of participation, at least in our office, and the Commissioner is with us as well. And today we will be discussing the contribution of women to the culture of peace, and I believe it's a very timely topic as well, aligning with the CSW's this year theme of review of the implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. I believe it was one of the most influential gatherings in the timeline of UN that had 12 critical areas of actions and working platforms for women's empowerment and girls' education. The declaration had a very diverse agenda and concrete commitments. So I believe today's meeting will touch based upon several of them as well. And moving on, I would like to introduce our first panelists. Everyone will have 10 minutes of a presentation time. And when we conclude with the remarks, I'll open the floor for any comments or questions. So today we have dear Angela Fernandez, our Commissioner for the New York State Division of Human Rights. Most recently, she served as the Executive Director and Supervising Attorney of the Northern Manhattan Coalition for Immigrant Rights. Ms. Fernandez is a graduate of the Columbia University School of Law and has more than 20 years of experience advocating for human and civil rights in the United States and internationally. She has also built broad city and statewide coalitions that have reversed policies potentially devastating to vulnerable New Yorkers. This includes, but not limited to, developing and implementing the nation's first universal court-appointed representation program for detained immigrants in New York State and the state. Earlier in her career, Ms. Fernandez worked as an off-air reporter for ABC News, World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, Good Morning America, and Nightline. Ms. Fernandez's education advocacy includes successfully founding and managing 2 academically rigorous elementary schools in the South Bronx and Washington, D.C., implementing the first of its kind Women's Studies program at Rikers Island Correctional Facility for female detainees. Ms. Fernandez served as the chair of the National Dominican Day Parade and was also on the board of the Civilian Complaint Review Board. Her work in government includes being a staffer for the U.S. Senator Bill Bradley and District Chief of Staff for Congressman Jose Serrano. With a wonderful background, please join us for this discussion.
Thank you very much. I want to thank especially Okay, I'll go ahead and repeat. I want to just thank the Journalists and Writers Foundation for inviting me to speak and for convening all of us together. It's amazing that through technology, we're still able to come together to have this very important conversation. So I'm the New York State Commissioner for Human Rights. And so the New York State Human Rights Law is 75 years old this year. It's the oldest anti-discrimination law in the country. And the agency that I run is tasked with investigating, prosecuting, and if we find that an entity has been engaging in discrimination, we will find liability, and the victim will be able to receive either monetary compensation or changes in policies. For example, they may get reinstated in their job if they've been discriminated against, or they may be able to gain housing if they were discriminated and then denied housing as a result. And so, as I mentioned before, the law was passed in 1945, 3 years before the UN Declaration of Human Rights. And the areas that it covers are employment, housing, and public accommodation. And the law has continued to expand every year to include more groups of people and more protected classes. It originally started with race, religion, color, and national origin. And over the years, it's increased, it's expanded to include, of course, women and gender-based protections. So something really interesting happened. As we all know, this conference and this discussion is around peace and inclusion for women. The Me Too movement was came about because women for many, many years had been suffering what I would consider one of the most violent and isolating things that can happen to a woman in the workplace, and that's sexual harassment. And so the Me Too movement grew in response to the inadequacy of the laws around protecting women who have been sexually harassed or discriminated against in their workplace. So in 2019, New York State was able to canalize the work of the Me Too movement and translate a lot of that work into expanding the anti-discriminatory protection specific to women in the workplace. And the New York State Division of Human Rights is now tasked with enforcing these new expanded laws that protect not only women, actually, anyone from sexual harassment in the workplace. So in 2019, the Division of Human Rights received 1,400 complaints of sexual discrimination from women. As I mentioned before, 2019 was a historic year for the Division of Human Rights in passing the record number of amendments to the human rights law, thanks to Governor Andrew Cuomo. And these amendments significantly expand protections available to all New Yorkers. In August of 2019, Governor Cuomo signed legislation that strengthened protections against discrimination and harassment, including sexual harassment, into the New York State human rights law. This legislation strengthened the law by ensuring employees' ability to seek justice and to ensure that perpetrators will be held accountable. How? By eliminating the restriction that the harassment be severe or pervasive in order to be able to bring a lawsuit into court. So before this law was passed, one had to prove that the sexual harassment in the workplace was severe and pervasive. And how do you prove that? And also, additionally, how much does a person have to withstand before actually being able to go to court? So by removing the severe and pervasive standard, it makes it much easier for a person to go into court if they have been harassed. It also mandates that all non-disclosure agreements allow employees to file a complaint of harassment or discrimination. And it extends the statute of limitations for employment sexual harassment claims filed from 1 year to 3 years. The definition of gender identity or expression was added as a protected category in all areas of jurisdiction. The Division of Human Rights has commenced a statewide outreach and education campaign to promote this landmark change in the law. And over a dozen events have already been scheduled that will soon be publicized on our agency's website and social media. Another important amendment passed this August is that now all employers, despite the number of employees, are also covered by the New York State Human Rights Law, and that non-employees in the workplace, such as contractors, vendors, are also protected by the New York State Human Rights Law. And finally, in September, lactation was explicitly included as a pregnancy-related condition which must be accommodated. This is specifically important for working class women. White collar workforce, the women who work in offices typically do have access to a private, quiet place where they can lactate. But working class women don't typically have, the employers typically don't accommodate them. And so now we've actually codified it into law that no matter what the workplace or where it is, even if it's in a restaurant or in a construction site, if an employee is lactating, they must provide a private place in which they can do that. So what is sexual harassment exactly? It's a form of sex discrimination and is unlawful under federal, state, and local law. This type of unlawful conduct may occur in many contexts, including employment, housing, educational institutions, or places of public accommodation. Places of public accommodation are restaurants, movie theaters, hospitals. Most sexual harassment, though, does occur in the workplace. Sexual harassment is unlawful when it subjects an individual to inferior terms, conditions, or privileges of employment. The harassment does not need to be severe and pervasive, as I mentioned before. And the sexual harassment can occur between any individuals, regardless of their sex or gender. New York law protects employees, paid or unpaid interns. So it's a very important note that interns are also included in this protection, and non-employees, including contractors. Harassers can be a superior, a subordinate, a coworker, or anyone in the workplace, including independent contractor, vendor, client, customer, or visitor. So what are some examples that would be considered a violation of the law? Requests for sexual favors, which may be accompanied by an implied or overt threat concerning one's job performance, evaluation, or promotion. Subtle or obvious pressure for unwelcome sexual activities. Verbal harassment or abuse in the form of a pattern of sexual comments or questions. Unnecessary or inappropriate physical contact. Displays of lewd photographs or drawings. So I'd like to share two specific cases that we had. We have many, many cases, but here are two that I think are very good examples. One is a female worker in Brooklyn alleged that she faced repeated acts of sexual harassment from a coworker while she was dealing with brain cancer, amongst other issues. The employer, a store that specializes in building products, allegedly terminated her instead of the harasser because the harasser was deemed a more valuable salesperson. The Division of Human Rights negotiated a $65,000 settlement for the female worker. Another example is where the Division of Human Rights successfully negotiated a $40,000 settlement in a case where a woman alleged that she had been denied the opportunity to participate in an affordable housing lottery for a new development in Queens on the basis of pregnancy and familial status discrimination. She reported that the property manager pointed to her stomach while she was pregnant and explicitly said that this is the reason why. The realty management company also agreed to provide a minimum of 2 hours of anti-discrimination and harassment training to all current and future employees and agents. And this will include training on reporting procedures following complaints of harassment discrimination. So you have an agent who points at this, a person who's trying to rent an apartment and points at her stomach and says, that is the reason why I'm not going to rent to you. And that is against the law. So in closing, we're excited to work with all of you. We consider these laws to be model laws that can be replicated around the country. And of course, if there are any other governments around the world that are interested in learning more about this, we would be more than willing to speak about this. Today, and when I was in my final note is that the federal government right now in the United States is retreating from its anti-discriminatory and human rights responsibilities, but we in New York State are becoming more aggressive and more expansive in our laws to ensure that every single New Yorker is protected and free from discrimination so that they can live in peace and be able to live in an inclusive society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner, for underlining the importance of promoting women's right to create peaceful societies. And when we first met in your office, you also mentioned about your wonderful civil society background with us as well. And I can clearly see how you reflect your background on your current post as the Commissioner. And it's always honoring for everyone to see more women in such decision-making positions. So thank you so much for your all contributions. And secondly, we move on to Sasha Butler as our next panelist. She's the Executive Director of Changing Destinations, Journey to Excellence. Sasha leads critical global education initiatives for school community partnerships and the implementation of leadership, socio-emotional learning, community service, and global citizenship education programs. Previously, Ms. Butler had various leadership positions in New York within higher education institutions, community-based organizations, and the business industry. Ms. Butler also serves as an international education consultant and strategist for In Excellence Consulting. She provides professional development resources to educators in the United States, Uganda, and Nigeria. Ms. Butler is a member of the Harvard University GSE think tank on global education, empowering global citizens, equipping teachers and administrators to foster global competence in schools by co-constructing curriculum and also devising strategies for systematic change. She is also a member of the World Council on Intercultural and Global Competence to promote intercultural understanding for a more peaceful and sustainable world. Sasha, please, the floor is yours. Your mic is unmute. I'm sorry.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we do hear you now. Thank you.
You're welcome. Once again, I want to take this opportunity to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who's on this call today. It is a pleasure and honor and opportunity to talk to you today about the role that youth play in peace building. I want to also thank the Writers and Journalists Foundation for this opportunity. I'm going to jump right in so that we can get through this and go over into the discussion on how the role that youth can play. I'll start with this quote: "An equal education is education for all. An equal education is an educated generation. We must play our part to ensure that all girls and women everywhere have the knowledge and skills they need to lead the charge and break down the barriers to gender equality for good." This is such a true statement. When we think about the SDGs, it is important to recognize that goal number 4 and goal number 5 have to coexist successfully. What is the status of women and girls today? When you look at some of the statistics on gender equality, we can see that 18% of women and girls ages 15 through 49 have experienced some sort of partner or some sort of union with a partner or a married person where they undergo some sort of physical or sexual abuse. And this has been reported from over 106 countries. 1 in 3 million girls ages 15 to 19, that's about 200 million girls and women, have been subject to female genital mutilation in over 30 countries reported. Women spend 3 times more hours a day of unpaid care and labor work than men do. Yet they don't have time or opportunities for education, leisure, or their careers. Now, if you was to put a price tag on the value of women in the workplace or women labor, that is over $10 trillion over a lifetime. So it is important to recognize the importance that girls play and women play in the economy, not just in the community, but overall in society. Strong women leaders in the workplace, strong women leaders in the community is a strong community and a strong country. Women represent 39% of the workplace, but in 2018, but only held 27% of the leadership positions. This is important because, again, with our role in the workplace, we have an impact. We make a difference. We bring a fresh perspective and fresh ideas to how things should be done and how to resolve conflict and how to come up with innovation. Only 57% of women ages 15 to 29, excuse me, only 57% of women ages 15 to 49 who are married in a union have a right or a say in their sexual relationships, the use of contraceptives, and healthcare services. Despite progress over the past 25 years, we still know that there are laws and gaps in the laws that do not protect women. And so they still are very vulnerable. Girls are still very vulnerable. And worldwide, 1 in 4 governmental seats are occupied by women. However, in the United States, only a quarter of our women in leadership, governmental leadership, are represented. So why does goal number 4 matter for goal number 5? Well, let's talk first about some of the inequalities. An estimated 15 million, that's about 48% of girls in primary school age are out of school. Teenage girls drop out of school for a number of reasons. We have socio-cultural expectations or pregnancies that limit their ability and their opportunity to engage in higher education, secondary education. Some of these expectations keep them in the household, in unpaid positions, keep them in the workplace where conditions and equity and access to pay equal to that of their male counterpart is limited. Women in the poorest households have the highest rates of illiteracy. And the reason why this is a concerning and alarming number is because those who start out illiterate pass down that legacy to their children. We know that a number of girls over the years who do pursue higher education don't always get the same quality of education as the boys in the classroom. And the skills that are introduced to them do not always empower them for the 21st century. Eric Erikson, who talks about the psychological stages of growth, talks about how each stage impacts the next stage. So it is important that when we're dealing with our girls and we're dealing with them at a very early age, during the primary ages, that we teach them and we empower them and we promote and advocate for them those rights to have a quality education. So what is the benefits though of SDG and SDG 4 and SDG 5? Well, children are 50% more likely to live past the age of 5 when their mother can read. 50% more likely. Some strong links between education and girls and socio-economic development within a community. As we talked about earlier, having girls educated means a strong economy and a strong community, and often strong countries. The longer a girl stays in school, the potential earnings increases 10% to 20%. That's $15 to $30 trillion. Youth participation in peace building. Global citizenship education is a powerful tool for motivating young women leaders to create sustained youth participation in peace building globally and locally. And in order to achieve the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, there are some things that we need to focus on. First, gender equality must be reflected at all levels. That's quality education, because while there has been an increase over the years of girls having access to education, it's not always quality. This is also in traditional, non-traditional, and mainstream global citizenship education environments. We know in the United States, a lot of STEM programs are geared towards young boys. And so more must be done to encourage girls to go into those STEM-related areas that's going to provide and access and opportunities for them in the future. Peace must be a preeminent focus for all, not just for girls and not just for women, but it's important both girls and boys take ownership and be included in the dialogue and the decision-making in addressing these issues. We can do this by fostering social change through community service and global citizenship activities. Girls must have access to relevant educational opportunities to develop their social, cultural, geopolitical, and their economic leadership mindset, and the skill set to have high-level leadership roles in their community. And boys must be exposed early to the value of having girls in leadership roles, and also respecting and valuing their diversity and their difference as an asset to their community and not a liability. I'm going to end with this. How do we achieve quality education and gender equality? Goal number 17, Partnership for Goals, is a tool that we can use to help youth build peace and to promote peace building in their community. Strong partnerships, data, and evidence-based practices are critical to sustain youth participation in peace building. The UN Security Council Resolution 2050 that was came about in 2015 on youth peace and security is a framework that youth organizations can use effectively to address these concerns and issues about getting youth involved. Remember, youth have a voice. Youth play an important role in making a difference. The UN Council resolution has 5 pillars, and these pillars are critical to youth making a difference. So often when we go to meetings and conferences, we talk about what youth need to do and how youth can improve their access to a better future. But so often youth are absent in those meetings. So I do challenge, in the role that I play as executive director for Changing Destinations, I challenge organizations and local governments and schools and businesses to include youth in their discussions and then in their initiatives and opportunities, because their voice is a fresh perspective. They see things from a different angle than we see it. So we must have them participate, always participate in the youth building. With the UN Council resolution, their working group has about a little over 50% of youth in it who are helping go through studies and helping the adults to realize what we need to do to secure their future and to help them have a better future, and also to help them make a difference today, whether it be conflict in their communities or violence in their schools or limited opportunities for work. Protection. It is important that youth have a safe place to share their ideas and a safe place to give voice to the things that they believe are important in society today, things that are going to help build peace in their community, in their homes and in their schools. Whether it be gang violence or whether it be war, youth have a perspective, youth have a voice, and they have an opinion, and we should listen to them. Prevention. A number of youth around the world are working on initiatives to address the issue of violence. They have strategies and they have initiatives. It is important that we, as adults, as communities and organizations, as governments and businesses, come together to provide that opportunity for them to implement these ideas. Most importantly to me is the partnership. Financially, we must do more and we must give more to support youth peace building. We must invest our time, our energy, and our money to make sure youth have a voice, to make sure youth are active in their community, and make sure youth are preparing a sustainable future for themselves. Now, the last one, the disengagement and re-engagement, is so important because we know there are so many distractions and disruptions that come about because of economic shifts, that come about because of war and because of violence in their communities. So when we work with youth, it's important that as they disengage, that we have resources and tools in place to help them re-engage again and to get back on track and to continue moving forward with a mindset and with an attitude and with actions for peace building. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sasha, for wonderful comments on the role of education for young women, for them to contribute meaningfully to create peaceful societies. And I know in person also that you're a perfect motivator and mover in your local community. So it's always a pleasure to have you around the table for such important agendas, topics that we have. Thank you so much. So moving on, you're welcome. Moving on, we have Aisha Arun with us from UK, participating at this panel discussion. She is the current director of the London-based Centre for Hizmet Studies and a research fellow at the Dialogue Society. As a recent international relations graduate and current MA student based at SOA, Aisha is developing her interests in theories of development, integration, and Islam. Has a keen interest in global affairs and an activist, mentor, and a volunteer in her local community. Aisha, please, the floor is yours.
Hi everyone, thank you for being here with us today, and thank you once again to the Journalists and Writers Foundation for facilitating the panel online. So today I'd like to begin my presentation with the words of Ban Ki-moon, the former Secretary General to the UN. Can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. In a speech he gave during his visit to Istanbul, Turkey in 2010, he said the following words regarding the work and contributions of Turks to a global culture of peace. Even amid difficult economic times, you have increased aid to the most vulnerable countries. Turkish civil society groups build schools in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq. Furthermore, Turkey has earned the right to speak out forcefully on issues of global importance. Let your voice be heard loud and clear. Let your voice be heard on issues of peace and security as well. So who are or were these civil society groups? Who was it that Ban Ki-moon was talking about and referring to? In Afghanistan, the civil society group was known as Afghan Turk CAG Educational NGO. In Pakistan, that civil society was known as Pak Turk International Schools and Colleges. And in Iraq, it is known as the Faisalar Education Company. These three organizations are products of Hizmet, or in English, service, a philosophy inspired by the teachings of the Islamic scholar Fethullah Gülen. Can we have the next slide, please? A few before, sorry. Before the term Hizmet. Before again, yeah, perfect. So what is Hizmet? Hizmet is a faith, Islam-inspired civil society movement that seeks to create a culture of coexistence within universal humanist values comprised of volunteers. The essence of volunteerism, service Hizmet, is to make a contribution without the expectation of anything in return. Put in a different way, whoever does his or her service with any expectation whatsoever for something in return would be not acting in the spirit of Hizmet, a selfless pursuit of volunteerism for the creation of a peaceful world. So going back to the title of my presentation, Women's Contribution to the Culture of Peace, Women Inspired by the Hizmet Movement, I would like to illustrate just these three examples that Ban Ki-moon had given and their contributions to the global culture of peace. So our first example, or first stop, is to Afghanistan, Kabul, a country which I'm sure all of you know until 20 years ago was under Taliban rule. During their 5-year rule, the Taliban prohibited education for girls and women. For those who disobeyed, they faced corporal punishment. Even after the US-led intervention, which ousted the Taliban, 2/3 of girls were still out of education. A series of harmful gender norms were established and dominated Afghan society. The prioritization of boys, forced child marriages, lawlessness, conflict, limited female teachers, and sexual harassment were all a contribution to the statistic. But as you can see in the next picture, amongst this culture of violence and gender oppression, there were the Afghan Turk schools, run by female teachers in positions of leadership throughout the school. The Hizmet-inspired schools championed in cultivating a culture of peace. And as you can see, they have the first graduates of secondary school or high school in the US termed graduates. To top this, there is Tahmina. She's a girl, along with her teacher, who defied all odds. Tahmina topped her university entrance exams, received a grade higher than both boys and girls. She's now studying medicine in Afghanistan. She is a product of Hizmet and an embodiment and determination of peace in Afghanistan. Our next stop is Pakistan, which is no different to Afghanistan in the shed of violence that the country has been experiencing. Combinations of both Al-Qaeda and Taliban militants have sought refuge in Pakistan after the invasion of Afghanistan. The similar harmful gender norms are also embedded in Pakistani society, such as early child marriage, lawlessness, and a lack of female teachers. However, there were the Pak Turk international colleges and schools, motivated by the words of Gülen, without science, religion turns into radicalism. Through various competitions, like the first maths Olympiad organized in Pakistan by the school, for all the schools in Pakistan to participate in, and modes of education, the school has begun to successfully break down the harmful norms and cultivate peaceful bridges. As you can see in the image, illustrates the female students. And the next one is a picture from the first maths Olympiad arranged in the country. It was participated by both boys and girls. So last but not least, the Faisalar Education Company, so a trip to Iraq. And again, unfortunately, you see the similar harmful gender norms persist in Iraq too. To topple this country is swallowed up in sectarian violence. So you have the Kurds, Arabs, Sunnis, Shias, Yazidis are used as political tools against one another. The Faisalar Education Company plays a vital role in building peace in the region, This school is that you see on the screen at the moment is one of the schools there, the Nulafar College, and the future images show. So this is, students actually revising during their summer break, in preparation for the university exams. You can see that, the dedication and volunteerism within this service as well, which is provided at no extra cost. The next picture is of Pawan Askan Talib, who said to her teacher, "You have taught us to return love and not revenge." And the next picture again is of the students within the school. All these pictures are from a thorough investigation, research into schools there provided. I'd just like to end with the words of Ban Ki-moon, who I began with in his Istanbul speech. He ended with, to quote your great 13th century poet, he says, Yunus Emre, "Don't look down on anyone, never break a heart, the mystic must love all 72 nations." At the United Nations today, we have 192 member states, but that poem could be our credo. The United Nations is founded on the most noble ideals. Yunus Emre, like other theologians, Rumi and Said Nursi, have had a significant influence on Gülen and members of his movement. I hope the Hizmet movement continues to embodying and personifying Yunus Emre's wise words. Thank you for listening to my speech. That's all for me.
Thank you so much, Aisha, for sharing a very important best practice that has also succeeded globally in education. And I also want to congratulate you on your efforts to organize a wonderful group of all young women who also joined us here as well for this discussion, came all the way from UK for the CSW sessions. So thank you for everyone for attending this session. Moving on, now we're gonna listen from Aliya Han. She's an Associate Research Fellow at the United Service Institution of India Center for Armed Forces Historical Research. Aliya is based in India and holds a Master of Philosophy in Middle East Studies from Jamia Millia Islamia. Her thesis addresses Occidentalism and society formation in a globalized world with special reference to female beauty ideals in Lebanon and Saudi Arabia. She is presently associated as Associate Research Fellow with the New Delhi-based defense think tank. Her interests are peace building, conflict resolution, and interfaith dialogue, and she is pursuing a certification in dialogue studies with Indialogue Foundation. Aliya, please, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Jemre, for having me and for this esteemed opportunity of meeting, even if it's an e-meet, but and thank you for arranging the e-meet also. I will be talking about the role of women in peace building and best practices from India. First of all, I would like to clarify that India, of course, is not a country with full-scale, high-intensity warfare battles. I'm just trying to confirm whether everybody can hear me clearly, because sometimes there is some problem with network. So in case anybody has trouble listening, they can just please point that out. I will begin with the definition of peace that will set the framework for my talk today. I'm going with Johann Galtung's definition, which is equality, equity, equal rights, dignity, symmetry, reciprocity, and diversity symbiosis, which anybody would know is very, very inclusive. So the point being that it is a positive definition of peace, where there is an absence of institutionalized violence and any form of violence that anybody has to go through. Then we move on to what is peace building. Peace building is a process which includes conflict prevention, peacemaking, peacekeeping, and peace reinforcement. It is understood as long-term institutionalized efforts to normalize a society, a country which has had to undergo violent conflict, and the efforts aim to address the causes of conflict rather than the immediate symptoms. So in the Indian context, I would like to clarify that although the the country India was formed after a lot of violent, uh, it had a lot of bloodbath involved, and the country also has various states. The states in India have not been a part of India willingly. The southern states were annexed, and some of the northeastern states were also annexed. And I am very sure everybody here is aware of the conflict in Kashmir. But still, it is not always high intensity, and there are various portions in of the country, in the north, in the west, in the south, which have experienced low intensity warfare for decades now, low intensity conflicts and violence for decades now. And it's also percolated the society, and it has resulted in maybe other forms of violence, such as gun violence, or sexual harassment, and a percolation of patriarchy in the society. So in the Indian context, be uh, will be restricting ourselves to a situation where, despite the absence of large scale high intensity warfare, or battles, and such cases, we will deal with sometimes state-sponsored attacks on communities in Kashmir, in the Northeast, and in the Indian state of Punjab, which where some of us might be aware that there is a separation movement going on, low intensity again, but it keeps popping its head again and again. So, so starting from the post-partition phase, I will begin to name a few personalities that I think have not been as well known in the international community. The first person that I will be talking about is Begum Anis Kidwai, who lost her partner, her husband, to the communal riots that preceded the partition of India. And it was, as we are aware, a bloody partition, and there was a lot of sexual harassment, rapes, and murder involved amongst the amongst the two communities, the Hindus and the Muslims, the Hindus of India and the Muslims of Pakistan. So what Anis Kidwai did, she was a burqa-clad woman who was homebound, but she was forced by her own trauma and the terror of communal bloodbath to come out and support other women who had to face the same at the time of partition. So all the women that I will be talking about, and all the women-led initiatives that I will be discussing today, are multifaceted, and so is this lady Begum Anis Kidwai's work in peace building. She helped set up schools for women and children during and after partition, which we know India is still a patriarchal society, but at the time women were not so educated, and women only from um, higher economic classes would study or would be expected to study. But she worked for the stability of homes and families and those bereaved by partition, and she also wrote books so that the horrors of partition are in a way, they can, others can also read about them, or others can also read about her work of rehabilitation, of providing homes and security to families who were bereaved by partition. Apart from that, the Punjabi poet and writer, Miss Amrita Pritam, her works also focused a lot on partition and post-partition reconciliation. She wrote a lot of stories about how Hindus and Muslims used to live together, were treated as one by each other's families, and her work still influences Indian literature and Indian society today. She held a mirror to the society, and her stories and her poetry also helped. So what we see is women dedicating their lives to preserving and promoting national integration and communal harmony in the post-partition context, the much needed effort for social justice for minorities, weaker sections, and also the handicapped. Um, these women also helped set up schools for the marginalized in India. So those are some of the things that these two women, Begum Anis Kidwai and Miss Amrita Pritam, did. Moving on, we talk about the northeast of India, which is also popularly known as the Seven Sisters. Again, seven states which did not originally intend to be a part of India, and some of them were also annexed, and some of them still experience a lot of state-sponsored violence in their communities. A lot of men from the community get picked up during the police raids that Indian conflict areas experience, and I will specifically talk about the women-led initiative of Manipur Women Gun Survivor Network, and also Manipuri women popularly calling themselves Mira Paibis, which in their Mighty language means, Mighty is their language, Meitei, which means torchbearers, which initially started because they had to hold night vigils to save the men in the community from being picked up by police forces or armed forces, Indian armed forces. So what we see here is their efforts to, again, they used to hold during the 70s and the 80s night vigils. They would use alarm bells, alarm signs, and make noises so that other members of the community become aware. And in this way they were able to save a lot of men and boys from being imprisoned indefinitely and unjustly, which again leads to stability in the society where there is a sense of security for all members of the society. Apart from that, they also take up the mantle of being auditors for government schemes at times. And what they basically do is, in these violent societies, they try to provide stability by having socio-economic um, schemes for the local women who are sometimes trained or maybe educated or have various new opportunities to come out of their houses and have an economic say in their everyday lives, make a living, earn a living, have something that they can convert into some form of decision making power. These women have also peacefully protested using the methods of sit-ins, or at times India, when we speak of Indian society, it is very restrictive on women, and a lot of times women are expected to keep themselves covered. But in in the Indian state of Manipur, where AFSPA, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, is in place, and also in Kashmir, there are a lot of allegations of rape against Indian armed forces, and these women help uh, protest against that as well. And one of the most iconic forms of their protest was disrobing in front of the armed forces headquarters in Manipur, which brought a lot of international attention to the issue. Apart from that, there is the Iron Lady uh, of Northeast India, Miss Irom Sharmila, that a lot of us would know about. She reaches out to a lot of other activists and communities that share the same concern and excuse me, and has been able to bring a lot of international attention and pressure on the Indian government to revoke their um, restrictive and unjust policies in the northeast states. Um, so what we see is a lot of social involvement in women's issues, and where women are in stable societies and are able to provide secure environments for the whole community. We see that there is it brings a lot of stability to such violence and conflict prone areas. When we move on to the case of Kashmir, Kashmir again is has undergone a lot of conflict in the past 20, 30 years since the elections in the state were meddled with. And it's again a state where the Indian government has been trying to um, repress a lot of concerns in their functioning in the state, and the people's resistance against it. We see the case of Miss Parveena Hangar, who again has helped a lot of uh, other people who are suffering from she lost her son to one such police raid, which are very popular in India. So the police stomps into a house late at night and they take away the men from that household, and her son was taken away. So she, after a couple of years of protesting outside, police stations, asking for help from the Indian government agencies in the state and all that, she started the disappeared person survivor network, they where the members of the family of the disappeared persons came out and collaborated to build pressure on the government to at least let them know where their families were, where their loved ones were, because there were no cases, no charges against them, and they were indefinitely jailed. So that is one thing which has brought international attention to the the case to the case of disappearing men in Kashmir, and it's the situation has been pretty bad in the last 4 or 5 months, as everybody here would be aware. The state is in lockdown from the central government. Apart from that, see Miss, we see the case of Dr. Girija Dhar, who helped many women who were suffering from these lockdowns and curfews in the Kashmir Valley. She was a doctor who trained and opened schools for many other women, and she has also helped the. She was a gynecologist who helped find ways through those curfews and through those lockdowns to help women who were maybe expecting or who had other medical conditions. And this is something the public health system is pretty is in a very bad shape in India. So her efforts and her the institutions that she has left behind, the hospital that she opened for women, and the training that the officials there impart to other volunteers has been really helpful in stabilizing the uh, parts of Kashmiri society where they operate. Apart from that, there is an NGO called Ehsas. Ehsas means emotions or feelings in the Indian language, Urdu. So the NGO is named Ehsas, and they work on psychosocial healing and economic development of women in the Jammu and Kashmir, in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. They they hold they hold meetings where women are able to open up about their experiences in the conflict prone region where there are a lot of allegations of sexual harassment by the armed forces also, and it helps them move on. It helps them in some cases, because women from all across the communities in the Kashmir Valley are involved in it. They are able to open up and they are able to realize that everybody is suffering. It's not just the Muslims, not the Hindus, not just the Sikh, or not just Shia Muslims, but because of these open channels of discussion and interaction, people are able to realize that the suffering is shared. And I feel that it is a very good way of uh, trying to normalize a conflict situation where everybody is able to tell their stories and listen to others. Moving on, I will talk about the present case of the Citizen Amendment Bill that the Indian government has initiated, which a lot of people feel will create a lot of stateless people in India, and especially because Muslims have not been included in the list of people who the Indian government will consider as citizens if they are not able to prove their ancestors' citizenship in the country. So it's raised a lot of concerns, and it was even though it's a very pressing issue, the Indian people were not really interested in it. It was the student community who was protesting it. But after the crackdown of the Indian state police on students protesting in Jamia Millia Islamia University, there were a lot of students were attacked, beaten up. Sorry?
Maybe the last 2 minutes, if you can wrap up.
Yeah. So in this case, after women were after protesting, college students were beaten up. The women of the local area joined and started protesting against the state sponsored violence against the college students. And it's called the Shaheen Bagh protest now, and it is active in at least 50 Indian cities and different areas. And the form of protest that women have initiated is, a lot of poetry, recitation, singing songs, inviting musicians who share their concerns against this citizenship amendment bill. And there is a lot of art, literature discussed. There is a lot of writing that the protesters involve in communally, and they bring in artists who make graffitis at the protest. They have their photo exhibitions. They have made a makeshift tree of peace, where they talk about different things that would come about because of peaceful coexistence of all communities. They make paintings on the roads, and what I am trying to get at is, it is peaceful. It has been able to garner a lot of international attention, and it has um, put the Indian government also in a spot which has refused to engage with with the protesters. So I will close by a wrap up of the best practices that I just discussed. The first will be restoration of communication and understanding amongst communities that there is no one truth, there is no one story. Uh, and all these things women have been doing informally. The Indian state is not involved in most states in these activities. The second is a stress on understanding local social and economic fabric before they engage in activities with the community. The next is training in traditional skills, which brings about, a shared sense of tradition of the local people, in spite of their differing political views or the background they share with their community members. Another is exploring culture. They use religious holidays and national holidays, which they try to celebrate and bring all communities together, which has been shown to be very, very helpful. Another is development of community-based socio-economic organizations, where when women are involved with each other in are in socio-economic contact with each other, they are more open to listening to their stories or being more understanding of their situation. The next is providing of psychosocial support and counseling, and forming reconciliation uh, committees, and forming listening and peacemaking circles. The next is inclusion of women as decision makers in peace negotiations. A lot of women in the Seven Sisters in the northeast of India have been successful in convincing the local state government in accepting women also as members of peace negotiations with conflicting parties. And the final is understanding that factors which make the conflict worse, such as the proliferation of guns and drugs and other such problems, and addressing them has been of a lot of help in these societies. And also that these efforts focus on self-representation. We should always aim for that. I will close with that, and thank you for listening so patiently. I hope you could hear me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing perspectives and cases from India. I think it's always very important to hear from different parts of the world to create inclusive policies, leaving no one behind. So as we heard from India, now we're going to move to Nicaragua. We have a list of speakers from different parts of the world. So Mariana Gueda, the founder and CEO of Meraki, will share her remarks with us. Mariana is a Mexican educator leader. She has a degree in marketing, a master in business administration with an emphasis in finance, and a master in education. She is also trained by the Harvard Graduate School of Education in mindfulness for educators, and has participated in the think tank on global education, empowering global citizens last year. She has worked for more than 14 years in the education field. She is the founder and director of Meraki, a social project on emotional education, which has been recognized as one of the best projects in Latin America by the Latin American Education Conference 2018 of the Harvard Graduate School of Education. In addition, she is an education consultant and speakers. She has given keynote presentations and workshops in many countries, including a TEDx talk as well. Mariana, we are ready for your remarks. I think your mic is off. Ezra, can you help her? Unmuting.
Do you hear me now?
Yes, we do hear you now.
Okay, can you see my my screen?
Yes, your screen is on as well.
Okay, so hi everyone. I'm gonna be really specific and very punctual with my presentation. I'm Mexican. I'm living in Nicaragua I've been here for 8 years. And here in Nicaragua, things are very different from the US or from other places in the world, because there's a lot of poverty and there's a lot of social violations in human rights. That's what's happening right now. My topic is about empowering young women through emotional education and entrepreneurship to cultivate a culture of peace. I'm gonna start with what's going on here in Nicaragua. And here in Nicaragua, we are now having a war. Since 2018, we've been having students started protesting against the dictator Daniel Ortega and his wife, she's a vice president and he's a president. Imagine that. And here they're violating all the human rights that are okay. Everything started with a protest against the government, and then a lot of people started joining the movement, and now what's going on is that women that are protesting, they're being held in jail, and in jail there have been a lot of sexual assault, and everything is very unjust. For example, some of the moms, some of the mothers of people that was in jail went to give them water, and just for that, just for giving them water, they were put in jail as well. So, okay, that's the first thing that is going on here that is really severe. For example, one of the things that the government is doing, the dictator that has been here in the government for more than 30 years, is with the Sandinistas, is that, for example, if you, they're searching they're looking in your social media and your pictures, everything you do, they screen it. And if you have any publications against the government whatsoever, they come, they close your organization, your shop, whatever you have, they instigate against you. Another thing that's going on here in Nicaragua is that there's a lot of, well, in the Latin culture, there's a lot of machismo. Machismo means that men are the ones that should have the power, that should have the CEO positions, the leaders should be the leaders, and women should be working in their houses, helping with the kids, and when you have the opportunity to study and have a degree, the higher positions are exclusively for men normally here. So there's a lot of social injustice in that case, in jobs. Since there's a lot of poverty and education is not a quality education, which should be which is one of the goals of the SDGs, the quality education. Here we don't have a quality education at all. If you have money, you can go to a private school and you can have a good education, but if you don't have the resources and you go to a public school, you will have a really poor type of education, or poor curriculum, the teachers are not well prepared, they don't even get how do you say, neither trained, neither how do you say, evaluated to see if they're doing a good job in the schools. Schools, many places here in Nicaragua don't even have water. There's no water. Some of them don't have any electricity resources for the teachers to work on and for the kids. Okay. Another thing that is going on here is that, okay, let me see if I'm not missing something here. Well, so since this country is a very poor country and there's a lot of differences in gap, in incomes, in everything. And since the war that started in 2018, things have been from bad to worse. People is getting fired from their jobs. Companies are closing. The salaries, which are like very low salaries, for example, the lowest salary is around $250 per month. And people are like missing jobs because because organizations, international organizations are going out, they're looking for another place because Nicaragua is very hostile right now. So there's a lot of depression, a lot of people committing suicides, a lot of young women taking drugs, drinking alcohol, and and getting pregnant, you know. So what do we do in Meraki? Here in Meraki, we work on social emotional education. I'm gonna read a little bit about what we do. It says, it's a process through which students acquire and apply the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage their emotions. With a self-awareness, set and achieve positive goals about self-management, feel and show empathy for others, and social awareness. So what do we do in Meraki? We give workshops and conference, and we have also a curriculum on emotional education. We help them through mindfulness, to helping them cope with difficult emotions, helping them have a clear mind, have a positive attitude towards life, knowing that they have their own value in life, regardless of what's going on around them. And one of the things we focus on is in the spiritual education or guidance. What do we do here? We don't talk about religion. Here we help them understand that we are spiritual beings having a physical or a human experience. And by this, we help them understand that you, with your mindset, with your attitude, with your positive thinking, with right goals, you can achieve whatever you want in life. And that everyone, regardless of their economic situation or social situation, everyone has their own talents and that can share with the world and that others need, because some of the kids here come very underestimated, very sad because they feel they don't have any value. So we help basically everyone, but specifically we work a lot with the girls to let them understand their power and their value. We tell them that you don't have to think outside the box, because really there is no box. You make in your mind, you make the box. So if you have the right mindset and you have the right tools on how to cope with your difficult emotions, how to control your mind, how to stay in the present moment, you can achieve whatever you want, regardless on what's going on, even though sometimes it's really hard. We help them accomplish an entrepreneurial mindset. We focus on the soft skills, we focus on the innovation, the creativity, the imagination, the communication, have critical thinking, have empathy towards others, instead of just working with a logical or math or science. We tell them, okay, that's very important, but you have to know how to apply whatever you're learning, because the knowledge comes from applying whatever you learn, not only getting degrees and getting stuff that is not really important in life. We help them seek opportunities, create opportunities, turn ideas into actions, use the resources they have wisely, collaborate, have teamwork, and develop their own products. For example, we have girls that do different projects with what they like to do, and we help them, like place them in different stores, teaching them how to have a business or how to start a business, even if they're not really earning a lot of money, but getting the right mindsets to be independent as women. Here we do a lot of meditation. We do yoga. We work with them. Half of the time is hands-on activities, and another part is teamwork, and then the other part is yoga. Because we really think that if you are in balance and if you are aligned, like mind, body, and spirit, then everything's gonna work out. So the key points or the closure points that we recommend, or we really want to have clear and want to recommend in education, is to help kids or to help young women to have a first of all, a positive mindset. It's not only the mindset, but for them to understand that words have power. And if you're thinking the right way and you're expressing the right way, that with the correct guidance of action and through mentors, you can accomplish whatever you want to do. To have clarity of mind, to know how to self-regulate, and there's what their mindfulness comes in, to attention and concentration, again with mindfulness, empowerment through projects, and have an entrepreneurial mindset. Here in Nicaragua, we have another organization, a big one that was created by Hillary Clinton. It was, the name is Vital Voices. Vital Voices, and here in Nicaragua, we have the good luck to have Vital Voices organization is basically of women. So what we do is we work through Vital Voices to help them teach young women how to be really independent. And then, so basically that's what I wanted to share with you, that is we have to focus not only in the titles or the job positions or getting more income, but if you have the right mindset and you have the right tools and the right mentors, for me, that's the key to success. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mariana, for sharing your wonderful best practice empowering girls through emotional education. I do appreciate your contributions. And lastly, we will hear from Cici Cole. She is the publisher and founder of Silk and Dress, Lifestyle of the Lady CEO, international women's media platform, an innovative platform advancing the status of women and girls all around the globe, sharing amazing stories to empower other women to be change agents. As president and CEO of Cole Associates Marketing, Ms. Cole led programs to engage private, public, and philanthropic sectors in trade, investment, and economic development opportunities. She is a former manager with JP Morgan Chase and global liaison officer for a top-tier market research firm analyzing 26 international offices, qualitative and quantitative research. Ms. Cole is an avid supporter of the United Nations, championing the Sustainable Development Goals by promoting quality education, gender equality, and peaceful, sustainable development. Cole was a delegate at former President Barack Obama's historic US-Africa Leadership Summit, former President Bill Clinton's annual Clinton Global Initiative, and the Bloomberg Global Business Forum. She also served as an ambassador for Save the Children and Women for Women International. Cici, the floor is yours. Mariana, I believe you need to stop sharing the screen for maybe Cici to move on with her presentation.
How do I do that? I'll stop sharing, yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. Cici?
Yes, can you hear me?
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Your mic is on.
Okay, wonderful. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you are in the world. It's really great to be here on this forum. I am looking at Anna, I believe.
Do you have a presentation to share or?
No, I don't. No, I don't have a video to share.
Okay, we can hear you, no problem.
You can hear me?
Sure.
Okay, awesome. So I would like to begin, and first I'd just like to thank JWF for this great honor in joining this panel. I know that we had a series of events scheduled at the NGO CSW I myself had 3, which I had to cancel, but I'm glad that we're able to improvise and to have this virtual meeting here today. So the panel goes on. I'd like to start with a quote by Phumzile Malabo Nuchoko, the executive director for UN Women. She says, "There's no greater force for change, for peace, for justice and democracy, for inclusive economic growth than a world of empowered women." I could not agree with that quote anymore. So today, as you mentioned, I am the founder of Silk and Dress. It's an initiative that we developed to advance the status of women globally. We champion sustainable development goals, 3, 4, 5, and 16. The cornerstone of who we are pivots around engaging women and girls in peace and capacity building for sustainable development. And we do that by engaging the formerly young and the new generation of advocates on the power of a woman's voice. For me, there are 2 critical areas of concern. Number 1, as we can see under this new administration, the threat of global armed conflict once again is revisiting us. I feel that the world has a lot of bit of tension right now. Number 2, the advancement of women and the achievement of equality between women and men are a matter of human rights and a condition for social justice and should not be in isolation as a women's issue. The only way to build a sustainable and just developed society is by empowering women and fighting for equality between women and men, which are the prerequisites for achieving political, social, economic, cultural, and environmental security among all people. When you think of the topics of war, it usually looks very masculine, right? So it's usually with images of heavy weaponry, big tanks, men with machetes, etc. That's a man's thing. But the face of war is the face of women, and that story is the story that we're telling here today. I am Generation Equality. I hear that in the echoes of a young woman named Konsole Nishimwe's story. She's a young women's rights advocate, a Rwanda genocide survivor, motivational speaker, and author of Tested to the Limit, a genocide survivor story of pain, resilience, and hope. Her childhood was transformed into horror and fear as she heard a broadcast on the radio from the commander for the Hutus to go and kill the Tutsis. Konsole lived through the genocide against Tutsis, who along with her mother and younger sister suffered physical torture, emotional abuse, and watched as her father and her brothers were executed. That's horrible. And if that wasn't enough, she was actually raped by the Hutus, and now she's living HIV positive. So for me, the face of war is a story of survival, faith, hope, resilience, and courage of Konsole's mother, who through her own personal pain of losing her husband and 3 sons at the hands of the militia, still have the strength and the courage to protect her daughters. A mother who accepted a hand from the Muslim community to find peace and security. Today, I thank Konsole for making contributions to the culture of war, the culture of peace, by telling her story of being tested to the limits. In a post-war, predominantly male-driven society, the provinces of Afghanistan, a young woman by the name of Ghazni Amin, a young woman who exemplifies tenacity and leadership, risked her life on a daily basis by serving as a role model for girls in Afghanistan. Ghazni co-founded the Young Women's Leadership Conference. It's a 2-week program that she designed to train women in the provinces of Afghanistan on Sustainable Development Goals 4, 5, 10, and 16 to engage young leaders across Afghanistan to foster collaboration, build resilience, and strengthen their capacity to build peace. I know Ghazni, and it's very motivating and inspiring to see her as a young, distinguished leader, advocate for women's strong role in the peace process, security, the fight against corruption, administrative reforms, extremism, terrorism, poverty reduction, and transforming Afghanistan into an economically empowered country. Gosnell's contributions to the culture of peace involve social change and engaging traditional leaders to ensure that bad customs and cultural norms against women, especially in rural areas, are eradicated. So when we think about peace and war, the history of peace is as ancient as the history of humanity itself, and absolutely as old as war. The global framework of the Declaration calls for the maintenance of peace and security at the global, regional, and local levels to prevent ethnic cleansing and armed conflict, to protect human rights of women and girls, as well as forms of violence against women and girls. So we're now here in March, and we have sprung forward into this month that's colored with vibrant stories of women of courage, resilience, and relentlessness, and young women picking up the torch proclaiming, "I am generation equality," as they realize their rights as women. It is fitting that UN Women launched this new multi-generational campaign entitled Generation Equality, marking the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, which was developed at the Fourth World Congress of Women in Beijing, China in 1995. It's one of the most comprehensive and progressive roadmaps for the empowerment of women and girls everywhere. So when someone asks me who I am and what I do, I often say, I am. Now I can say I am generation equality. I am empowered. I am peace. I am a woman. I'm a woman that fights on the front line for the development and advancements for women and girls everywhere. While we have made tremendous progress, we still have a long way to go in achieving peace and full equity for all women. And as we forge here, I heard a lot of presentations which were very good. So I know that we're in great hands. We have great empowered women that's here today. So great job for assembling this panel. But as we forge forward, I encourage every woman here and I challenge all of us to continue to use our voice as a voting mechanism, hold our leaders accountable. Let's protect the fabric of our institutions. Let's continue to fight for good governance, peace, and security. And let's try to hold on to the rule of law. And most importantly, never forget who we are in the midst of war, peace, and security. We are the voice of reconciliation. We are the voice of peace. And we are women united, together fighting for the end of poverty in rural areas, against women with disabilities, against midwives, or against women with disabilities once again, and against women that are in the LGBT community. We must continue to be on the front line to fight for all rights for all women and to eradicate violence against all women. We have been here for over an hour and 35 minutes. I'm gonna leave it there short with my remarks. But most importantly, what I do want to leave us with is that we all are in the fight for good governance, peace, and security. And let's continue to fight for generation equality as well and bring the young women behind us and teach them how to advocate for the Sustainable Development Goals.
Thank you so much, Sissy, for your wonderful and inspiring words.
It's sweet.
So we have online participation as well. Maybe before we wrap up, I can have very brief comments and questions if there are any from our online audience, but very brief, please. If you can introduce yourself, if there's anyone out there who would like to join us. You can just open your mic and get in. Okay, so yeah, please. It's on.
So, well, first of all, I would like to thank for being in this panel discussion. I learned a great deal of women empowerment and also what women leadership is doing in the field in terms of empowering women and educating young girls. I have a comment, but at the same time a question to New York State Human Rights Commissioner. for being with us today. I think when we talk about sexual harassment, and I know that the New York State is the Human Rights Commission is doing a great job in terms of promoting and protecting, women, girls, from sexual harassment, not only in this public space, but in the workplace and in educational institutions as well. And we also have Title IX that protects, both men and women, and also, like all genders, from any sexual harassment. And this is not only physical, but it is visual, it's verbal too. And everybody touched on the importance of education. And I would like to know how the New York State Commission is empowering the Board of Education in terms of teaching what are the rights of students starting from high school, maybe, that before they step into higher education, that they learn about what Title IX is and how that is protecting sexual abuse.
No, that's a great question. So I just want to be clear that the New York State human rights law protects anyone from sexual harassment, men, women, non-binary, trans. So I want to be very clear on that. With regard to Title IX specifically, Title IX is a federal law, and so we would not teach Title IX specifically. We leave that to the federal government to do that. But we definitely are engaging with different superintendents associations, different principals associations to share information about these new laws that have just expanded. And we are just starting to reach out to younger folks. I'm actually going to be interviewed by a young person that has a very large following on their YouTube channel. Because we have found that the best way to reach the youth is actually directly through their peers, and so that is something that we are now also engaging in.
Thank you so much. On behalf of the Journalists and Writers Foundation, so we are a civil society organization, and I think many of the for leadership over here, they belong to a civil society organization. So we'd like to assure that we are at your disposal, and we'd like to play our role in the community to promote, and protect violence against women, sexual harassment. If there is any space for us in the school system or in the public. So,
absolutely, we would love to partner with you on that, and we also have materials that I'm happy to have our team email to you. We have these very easy to read one-pagers specifically around harassment, and if anyone on the call is interested as well, in this conference is interested, we're happy to share it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I would like to thank all of our speakers, panelists, and our online audience here. And I will be sharing this full recording with our panelists and also posted online at our social media platforms as well. So you're more than welcome to promote our discussion to wider audiences as well. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.